The Ithorian captain hid his disgust as he watched the primitive human ship sputter and flail against the void of space. Disgusting creatures, their technology so far below the might of the Ithorian Empire, it was almost painful to watch. For millennia, the Ithorians had reigned supreme across the galaxy. Hundreds of star systems fell under their dominion. Thousands of races paid tribute to their glory. They were the undisputed masters of all they surveyed. But they were not foolish, and in their wisdom they kept watch on the many worlds that harbored life, even such young and undeveloped worlds as Earth. So they hid their ships in the shadow of the moon and observed humanity's fledgling steps into the stars with disdainful amusement. These primates, who had only recently discovered fire, fumbled with rockets and dreamed of stepping foot on their nearest celestial neighbor. The Ithorians had a betting pool on which of the ridiculous contraptions would explode next. Captain Knox nearly choked on his laughter when the human ship designated Lambda 3 suffered a catastrophic hull breach. He watched the pilot, one Thomas Freeman, guide the wreckage towards the moon, the only option to avoid being cooked alive by the unfiltered light of the sun, an ignoble end for an ignoble species, except the hull breach wasn't due to mechanical failure. Knox tapped a few keys and the data scrolled past his eyes. The tear in the ship's hull was the result of a blast from an Ithorian disruptor cannon, one that had no business being in this system. The implications sent Knox's hearts racing. If the humans discovered Ithorian weapons technology, there would be awkward questions asked, sanctions, loss of face. He had to ensure the human pilot's silence one way or another. Knox traced the disruptor blast to its origin and opened a channel to the commander of the 15th Extra System Expeditionary Fleet. Commander Vorch, would you care to explain to me why there is a human ship crash landing on the moon with a hole in its hull the exact size and shape of a blast from an XR-227 vacuum compression cannon? The face of the commander went pale as bleached bone. Captain Knox, I can explain. We were testing a new prototype. We didn't think... No, Commander, you certainly did not think. Ready your troops, we're going hunting. I want that crash site secured immediately. Yes, Captain, right away. Knox closed the video and returned his attention to the view screen. His mandibles clicked in agitation as he watched the human ship come to rest on the lunar surface. All he could do was hope the human died on impact. It would make his job so much simpler. Thomas Freeman coughed as the rancid smoke filling the cockpit burned his lungs. The ship groaned like a dying whale around him, ready to collapse at any moment. He wrenched his flight harness off and staggered to the evacuation hatch, hitting the emergency release with hands that shook with adrenaline. The hatch blew off and blessed silence filled the cabin as the last wisps of atmosphere vanished into the void. Thomas grabbed an emergency enviro suit from the locker and stepped out onto the lunar surface. The moon stretched out before him, a barren wasteland of gray dust and eerie stillness. In the distance, he could see the blue marble of the earth, the world he called home, now impossibly out of reach. He was alone, stranded, with only the emergency supplies in the damaged ship to sustain him. Thomas felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the cold vacuum surrounding him. He didn't know what had caused his ship to malfunction, but he did know one thing. His situation had just gone from bad to worse. As Thomas explored the lunar landscape looking for shelter, his eyes fell upon an anomaly in the rocky terrain, a geometrically perfect rectangle like a door set into the ground. Heart-pounding, he approached it cautiously, brushing away the lunar dust to reveal strange alien hieroglyphs carved into the frame. What he had taken for a natural rock formation was anything but. He had just stumbled upon an alien outpost. As Thomas stepped into the alien battlesuit, it came alive around him, advanced systems syncing with his thoughts. His reflexes sharpened to a razor's edge, and he felt strength flooding his limbs, the suit enhancing his every movement. The HUD lit up with targeting reticles and system status reports, giving him total control over the suit's vast arsenal. Thomas activated the jetpack and shot out of the airlock into the void, leaving the crippled remains of his ship behind. The Ithorian soldiers swarmed around him like angry hornets, their bulky armor no match for his agility. He dodged and weaved through their fire, his own weapons spitting lances of brilliant energy that cut through their ranks with deadly precision. The recoil of the suit's weapons was like the kick of a mule, but the stabilizers kept him steady as he flipped and spun, using the moon's low gravity to his advantage. Ithorian soldiers crumpled before him, their armor melting and splitting like overripe fruit. Thomas felt a fierce joy singing in his veins as he fought, the suit's systems responding to his thoughts faster than he could articulate them. On the bridge of the Ithorian command ship, Captain Knox smacked his fist into the arm of his chair as he watched the battle unfolding on the console. "Intensify forward firepower," he snarled at the weapons officer. "I want that human reduced to atoms." The Ithorian fleet opened up on the moon's surface with everything they had, the barrage churning the gray dust into plumes of debris that scattered in the low gravity. The bombardment rocked Thomas in his armor, warning indicators flashing across his HUD. He gritted his teeth and fired his jetpack, seeking cover in the depths of the alien outpost. The bombardment cut off abruptly as Thomas passed through the airlock, the meters-thick rock absorbing the punishment of the Ithorian guns. He found himself in a massive central chamber, dominated by a glowing holographic display that shimmered with esoteric symbols and strange three-dimensional shapes that made his eyes water. Still clad in the battlesuit, Thomas approached the display, reaching out with armored fingers to touch the controls. As soon as he made contact, the entire outpost shuddered as if coming awake after centuries of slumber. Hidden doors ground open in the walls and floor, and swarms of spider-like robotic drones boiled out, filled with weapons. Thomas instinctively raised his rifle to fire, but the drones ignored him, scuttling past him on hundreds of metallic legs to pour out of the airlocks and into space. He watched in awe as the robotic swarm engulfed the Ithorian ships, the aliens' weapons fire spattering harmlessly off the drones' ablative armor. The Ithorian ships reeled back before the onslaught, their hulls shredding like cheap plastic as the drones bored into them. Escape pods belched from the stricken ships as they fell apart, the Ithorians fleeing before the implacable advance of the robotic swarm. Seizing his chance, Thomas jetted out of the outpost and up to one of the Ithorian warships wallowing in low lunar orbit. Pulse pounding in his ears, he burned through the hull with his rifle and clambered into the ship's corridors, the artificial gravity lurching sickeningly as the ship's systems failed. Ithorian crewmen scattered before him as he blasted his way towards the engine room, hell-bent on sabotaging the ship's reactor and crippling the fleet. The thunder of combat boots on metal decking told him he had company, and he spun to see Captain Knox himself striding towards him, clad head to toe in an ornate suit of powered armor festooned with trophies from past campaigns. "I will flay the skin from your bones, ape," the captain growled, his voice dripping with menace. Thomas raised his rifle and triggered a hail of blasts at the captain, but Knox's armor shrugged off the barrage like rainwater. Knox aimed his own rifle, a glowing golden barrel as long as Thomas was tall, and squeezed the trigger. A torrent of incandescent energy sizzled past Thomas's head, close enough to make his teeth ache. They crashed together in a maelstrom of whirling metal, servos in their armor screeching with the strain. Thomas ducked a swipe from Knox's energy blade and hammered his armored fist into the captain's midsection, doubling him over. Knox retaliated with a blast from his rifle that sent Thomas skidding backwards across the deck, stars swimming in his vision. "Why?" Thomas growled as he staggered back to his feet. "Why are you doing this?" Knox laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Why? For the glory of the Ithorian Empire. Once we have the technology sleeping in that lunar outpost, the galaxy will tremble before us. Humanity will submit or burn." Thomas tightened his grip on his rifle, anger coursing through him. "Not on my watch!" He threw himself at Knox with restored dedication, hammering the captain with a flurry of strikes. Knox matched him blow for blow, the entire ship bucking and swaying around them as the battle raged. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks, and the deck lurched underfoot, but neither Thomas nor Knox gave any ground. Thomas managed to grab hold of Knox's rifle just as the captain triggered another shot. With a desperate heave, he wrenched the barrel towards the ceiling, and a torrent of golden energy ripped through the bulkhead above them. A geyser of blue-white plasma roared out of the breached reactor chamber, sending Nox flying backwards in a tangle of sparking limbs. Thomas seized his chance, leaping over Nox's prone form and sprinting into the reactor chamber. The shimmering core pulsed before him like an obscene heart, just waiting for his coup de grace. He primed every remaining weapon in his armor's arsenal, linking them into a single massive salvo. "Time to light this candle," he muttered as he pulled the trigger. A dozen different flavors of destruction converged on the reactor core, puncturing its magnetic containment field and sending waves of blue-tinged energy washing over its surface. Cracks spread like spiderwebs in the core's casing, and puffs of vaporized coolant gusted into the room, telltale signs of an imminent overload. Thomas turned and sprinted for the breach in the hull, his armor's HUD blaring dire warnings of the catastrophic meltdown about to take place. He leapt into space just as a miniature sun bloomed behind him, the shockwave hitting him like a hammer of the gods and sending him cartwheeling away into the void. He righted himself in time to watch the Ithorian warship erupt into a supernova of light and fury, the explosion ripping it apart down to its keel. The blast flattened the nearest ships like tin cans hit by a sledgehammer, and sent the rest of the fleet spinning like leaves in a hurricane, their formation shattered beyond repair. Thomas jetted back to the airlock of the lunar outpost, ignoring the startled chatter on his suit's comms as it picked up transmissions from the Ithorian ships. His heart was still pounding with the thrill of victory, but his mind was racing ahead. Earth was safe, for now. But the Ithorians knew his homeworld existed, and they would be back in force. He had to find a way to protect his planet, and that answer lay in the alien technology slumbering beneath his feet. The battle was won, but the war had just begun. Thomas stared at the holographic display, his heart pounding as he watched swarms of Ithorian ships materialize from hyperspace. The lunar horizon blazed with the light of their engines as they took up attack positions. "Shit," he muttered. "This is going to be rough." He turned to the army of robotic drones standing silently behind him. Their metallic bodies gleamed in the dim light of the control room. "All right, you bolt buckets," Thomas said, cracking his knuckles. "Time to earn your keep." With a thought, he sent the drones scurrying out of the airlock. They poured across the lunar surface like a tide of living metal, taking up defensive positions around the outpost. The Ithorian fleet opened fire. Lances of energy stabbed down from orbit, gouging deep craters in the moon's surface. The impacts sent plumes of gray dust billowing up in eerie silence. Thomas gritted his teeth as the outpost shuddered. Warning lights flashed across his HUD. He needed to find better cover, fast. He sprinted deeper into the alien facility, armored boots clanging on metal floors. The passageways twisted and branched, leading him ever downward. Strange glyphs adorned the walls, pulsing with faint light. A muffled boom echoed through the tunnels. Thomas stumbled as the floor lurched beneath him. The Ithorians must have breached the outer defenses. He burst into a vast chamber and skidded to a halt. In the center floated a pulsing sphere of light, tendrils of energy crackling around it. Thomas approached cautiously. "What the hell?" As if in response, the sphere flared brighter. A beam lanced out, engulfing Thomas. He tensed, expecting pain, but instead felt a strange presence brush against his mind. "Greetings, human," a voice echoed in his head. "I am the custodian of this facility." Thomas blinked in surprise. "You're an AI?" "Correct. I have slumbered for eons, awaiting one who could awaken me." "Well, happy to oblige," Thomas said. "Listen, I hate to rush introductions, but I've got a bit of a situation up there." "I am aware," the AI replied. "The Ithorians seek to claim this outpost and its secrets." The sphere pulsed, and suddenly Thomas's mind was filled with images and knowledge. He saw a vast, galactic civilization, technology beyond his wildest dreams, and a network of outposts like this one scattered across the stars. "Holy crap," Thomas breathed. "No wonder the Ithorians want this place so bad." Indeed, but they must not be allowed to succeed. The power contained here could upset the balance of the entire galaxy. Thomas nodded grimly. "Right, so how do we stop them?" Interface your combat suit with my systems, the AI instructed. I will upgrade your capabilities and grant you control over the outpost's full defensive array. Thomas did as instructed. Instantly, he felt power surge through him. His HUD lit up with new weapons systems and tactical data. He grinned fiercely. Now this is more like it. Meanwhile, aboard the Ithorian flagship, Captain Knox snarled orders at his troops. Push forward! Crush their defenses! I want that human's head on a pike! Knox's face was a mask of rage, his eyes burning with hatred. He would not be denied his vengeance. On the lunar surface, Thomas emerged from the outpost. He raised his arms, and swarms of upgraded drones rose at his command. Energy shields sprang to life around the facility, deflecting incoming fire. Thomas jetted into the sky, unleashing devastating volleys from his enhanced weapons. Ithorian dropships exploded in flames, their burning wreckage raining down on the advancing troops. The moon's surface became a chaotic battlefield. Beams of energy crisscrossed the void. Explosions bloomed silently in the airless environment. Thomas darted between enemy formations, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to dance through their fire with ease. Just as the tide of battle seemed to turn in his favor, Thomas's comms crackled to life. A panicked voice cut through the static. This is Earth Defense Command. We're under heavy attack. Multiple Ithorian ships bombarding major cities. Request immediate assistance. Thomas's blood ran cold. He looked up, seeing the blue marble of Earth hanging in the void. Flashes of light sparkled across its surface, the telltale signs of orbital bombardment. No, he whispered. This ends now. Thomas knew he had to find a way to stop the Ithorians here, on the moon, before Earth was reduced to ashes. But how? The answer lay somewhere in the ancient outpost beneath his feet. He just had to figure it out before it was too late. Thomas stared at the holographic display, his heart sinking as he watched Earth burn. The Ithorian assault raged unchecked, laying waste to humanity's home. He clenched his fists, desperation clawing at him. There has to be something we can do, he growled. The AI's voice echoed in his mind. There may be a way, but it is not without risk. A section of wall slid open, revealing a shimmering portal of energy. Thomas's eyes widened. What is that? A gateway to other outposts across the galaxy. Through it, we may find the allies you need. Thomas didn't hesitate. He strode towards the portal, dedication etched on his face. Fire it up. Energy crackled as the gateway activated. Thomas deployed a probe, watching as it vanished into the void. Long minutes ticked by as he waited for a response. Suddenly, the holographic display lit up with new data. Thomas leaned in, studying the readouts. What am I looking at? The Onavim, the AI replied, a civilization of great power, once allies to my creators. Thomas's mind raced. This could be the break they needed. He composed a message, pouring every ounce of urgency into his words. To the Onavim people, Earth faces annihilation. The Ithorians seek power that threatens us all. We need your help. He sent the transmission, praying it would pierce the Onavim's isolation. Hours passed. The situation on Earth deteriorated. Cities fell silent as Ithorian weapons rained death from above. A harsh laugh cut through Thomas's comms. Captain Knox's voice dripped with malice. Surrender the outpost, apes, or watch your world burn. Thomas gritted his teeth, ready to spit defiance when the gateway flared to life. A massive ship emerged, unlike anything he'd ever seen. Beings of light and energy stepped forth, led by one who radiated ancient wisdom. I am Koth, the being intoned. We have heard your plea. Thomas felt a glimmer of hope. Can you help us stop the Ithorians? Koth nodded gravely. There is a way, but first, you must prove worthy. What followed was a grueling series of trials. Thomas's mind and body were pushed to their limits. He solved impossible puzzles, faced his deepest fears, and emerged stronger than ever. Finally, Koth placed a hand on Thomas's shoulder. You have earned the right to wield our power. Together, we will end this threat. Thomas nodded, a fierce grin on his face. Let's do this. They stepped through the gateway, materializing aboard the Ithorian flagship. Thomas's enhanced senses took in every detail as they moved silently through the corridors. Remember, Koth whispered, find the central computer core, input the shutdown codes. The entire fleet will fall. Thomas nodded, readying himself for the fight ahead. The fate of Earth, of the entire galaxy, rested on what happened next. Thomas stepped through the shimmering portal, the energy crackling around him as he emerged onto the Ithorian flagship. Koth and the Anavim warriors materialized beside him, their forms coalescing from pure light. The alien corridor stretched before them, its walls pulsing with an eerie blue glow. Remember the plan, Thomas whispered, his voice tense. We split up here. Koth, take your team to the computer core. We'll handle the reactor. Koth nodded, his luminous form flickering slightly. May fortune favor us both, Thomas Freeman. As Koth's team vanished down a side passage, Thomas signaled his squad forward. They crept through the ship's winding corridors, the hum of alien machinery growing louder with each step. Suddenly, an alarm blared. Ithorian soldiers poured from nearby chambers, their insectoid faces twisted in rage. Thomas's suit hummed to life, ancient tech responding to his thoughts. He raised his arm, unleashing a barrage of energy bolts that tore through the first wave of attackers. His team followed suit, their weapons cutting swaths through the Ithorian ranks. "Push forward!" Thomas shouted, ducking under a plasma blast. He rolled to his feet, smacking his palm into an Ithorian's chest. The alien's exoskeleton crumpled like paper. They fought their way through corridor after corridor, leaving a trail of scorched metal and fallen foes in their wake. Finally, they reached a massive door emblazoned with warning glyphs. "This is it," Thomas said, panting. "The reactor core." As the door slid open, a monstrous shape loomed before them. An Ithorian battle mech, its pilot protected behind layers of armor and energy shielding. "You will go no further, human filth," the pilot's voice boomed. The mech's arms whirred, unleashing a storm of searing energy. Thomas's suit flared, a shimmering barrier deflecting the assault. He charged forward, targeting the mech's joints with precision strikes. Sparks flew as Thomas tore into the war machine. He ripped away armor plating, severed hydraulic lines, and shorted out weapon systems. The mech stumbled, its movements growing sluggish. With a final, brutal punch, Thomas breached the cockpit. The Ithorian pilot slumped in his seat, unconscious. "Clear!" Thomas called out. "Secure the reactor room!" As his team spread out, Thomas's calm crackled to life. Koth's voice came through, strained but triumphant. "We've breached the computer core, Thomas. Uploading the virus now." Thomas allowed himself a grim smile. "Good work. We're initiating the reactor overload." He approached the pulsing heart of the ship, his fingers dancing over alien controls. Warning klaxons blared as energy levels spiked. The deck plates beneath his feet began to vibrate. "It's done," Thomas said. "Let's move to extraction." They fought their way back through the ship, the corridors now filled with panicked Ithorians. As they neared the rendezvous point, a familiar figure stepped into view. Captain Knox, his battlesuit gleaming, stood before them. A squad of elite guards flanked him. "So," Knox snarled, "the monkey thinks he can best me on my own ship." Thomas raised his fists, energy crackling around them. "It's over, Knox. Your fleet is done." With a roar of rage, Knox charged. Thomas met him head-on, their suits clashing in a thunderous impact. They traded blows that would have shattered lesser armor, each strike sending shockwaves through the ship. As they fought, Koth's voice came over the comm once more. "Virus upload complete. Ithorian systems are going dark across the fleet." Knox howled in fury, realizing his defeat. He thumped his hand into a nearby console. "If I fall, you all fall with me." Alarms screamed to life. A computerized voice echoed through the ship. "Self-destruct sequence initiated. Detonation in 5 minutes." Thomas's mind raced. There was only one way to stop this. He turned and sprinted towards the reactor core, shouting into his comm. "Koth, get everyone out! I'm going to vent the reactor!" He burst into the reactor chamber, the air shimmering with barely contained energy. Thomas interfaced his suit with the ship's systems, redirecting power flows and overriding safeguards. The deck buckled beneath him as he poured every ounce of the reactor's might into his suit. Pain lanced through his body, the energy threatening to tear him apart. With a primal scream, Thomas unleashed the power. A beam of pure destruction erupted from his hands, punching through the ship's hull and into the lunar surface below. The explosion ripped across the barren landscape, a new crater forming in an instant. As the ship began to break apart around him, Thomas felt his suit's power failing. He stumbled towards the breach, the void of space yawning before him. With the last of his strength, he hurled himself into the abyss. The flagship plummeted towards the lunar surface in a ball of flame. Thomas drifted in the silent vacuum, his battered suit leaking atmosphere. As consciousness faded, he saw pinpricks of light approaching. Koth and the Onavim, come to save him. Thomas's last thought before the darkness took him was of Earth, safe for now from the threat among the stars. Thomas's eyes snapped open, his lungs burning as he gasped for air. The sterile white of an Onavim medical bay surrounded him, a far cry from the cold vacuum of space where he'd last been conscious. His body ached, every movement sending waves of pain through his battered frame. "Easy, Thomas," Koth's familiar voice soothed. "You've been through quite an ordeal." Thomas tried to sit up, his muscles protesting. "Earth, what's happening?" Koth's luminous form dimmed slightly. "I'm afraid the news isn't good." A holographic display flickered to life, showing Earth's orbit swarming with Ithorian ships. Beams of destructive energy rained down on the planet's surface, cities crumbling under the onslaught. "No," Thomas breathed, his fists clenching. "How?" "Nox survived," Koth explained. "He's commanding from a new dreadnought, more powerful than anything we've seen before." Thomas swung his legs off the bed, ignoring the pain. "We have to stop him now." "The Council agrees," Koth nodded. "We're mobilizing our full fleet." Days blurred together as Thomas underwent accelerated healing treatments. The moment he could stand without assistance, he demanded to rejoin the fight. Koth led him to a chamber where a sleek new suit of armor waited. "This is our most advanced battle system," Koth explained as the armor encased Thomas. "It should give you an edge against Nox's forces." Thomas flexed his fingers, feeling the power humming through the suit. "When do we move?" The answer came in the form of alarms blaring throughout the Onavim ship. Outside the viewports, space lit up with energy weapons as the Onavim fleet engaged the Ithorian armada. Thomas and his strike team boarded a stealth shuttle, using the chaos of the battle as cover. They approached Nox's massive dreadnought, the ship's hull looming before them like a metal mountain. "Remember the plan," Thomas instructed as they prepared to breach. "We split up, cause chaos, then rendezvous at the bridge." The team nodded, their Onavim forms shimmering with anticipation. With a hiss of depressurization, they blasted a hole in the dreadnought's outer hull and surged inside. Immediately, they were met with a storm of energy bolts. Ithorian shock troopers swarmed the corridor, their insectoid faces twisted in hatred. "Scatter!" Thomas yelled, diving behind a bulkhead. The narrow space erupted into a furious firefight. Thomas's new armor responded instantly to his thoughts, deploying energy shields and returning fire with pinpoint accuracy. He caught glimpses of his Onavim allies as they engaged in close combat, their light-based forms dancing between Ithorian attackers. Thomas charged forward, his armor's enhanced strength allowing him to bull rush through the Ithorian lines. He grabbed one shock trooper, using the alien's body as a shield while he fired over its shoulder, clearing a path deeper into the ship. "We're breaking through," he shouted into his comm. "Everyone, push forward." The team split up, each member taking a different route towards the bridge. Thomas sprinted down twisting corridors, his HUD guiding him through the labyrinthine ship. He encountered pockets of resistance, but his new armor made short work of them. As he neared the ship's core, A massive blast door blocked his path. Thomas placed his hand on the control panel, his suit's systems interfacing with the Ithorian tech. The door groaned open, revealing a cavernous chamber beyond. Thomas stepped inside, his eyes widening at the sight. A colossal reactor pulsed with energy, powering the dreadnought's devastating weapons. And there, standing on a raised platform, was a familiar figure. "Welcome aboard, Ape," Captain Knox sneered, his battlesuit gleaming. "I've been expecting you." Thomas raised his weapons, energy crackling around his fists. "This ends now, Knox." The Ithorian captain laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Oh, I couldn't agree more." With a roar of fury, Knox launched himself at Thomas, the two titans clashing in a battle that would decide the fate of Earth. The corridors of the Ithorian dreadnought echoed with the clash of metal and the sizzle of energy weapons. Thomas Freeman led his infiltration team through the labyrinthine passages, their Onavim battle armor gleaming under the harsh artificial light. The acrid smell of ozone filled the air as their energy blades sliced through the ranks of shock troopers blocking their path. "Push forward!" Thomas shouted, his voice raw from exertion. He ducked under a volley of plasma bolts, feeling the heat sear past his helmet. With a quick thrust, he impaled an Ithorian soldier, the alien's chitinous exoskeleton cracking under the force of the blow. Beside him, an Onavim warrior unleashed a devastating arc of energy, carving through 3 enemies in a single sweep. "We're nearing the bridge sector," the alien ally reported, its luminous form flickering with each movement. Suddenly, the corridor ahead sealed shut with a resounding clang. Thomas smacked his fist against the impenetrable bulkhead. "Knox is onto us," he growled. "He's trying to box us in." As if on cue, the ship's intercom crackled to life. Knox's guttural voice filled the air, dripping with contempt. "Did you really think you could sneak aboard my vessel undetected, Ape? My guards will ensure your corpses never leave this ship." Thomas turned to face his dwindling team, now reduced to himself and 2 Onavim warriors. "We need a new plan," he said, his mind racing. "Any ideas?" Before anyone could respond, the far end of the corridor erupted in chaos. A platoon of Ithorian warriors in massive powered armor suits stormed towards them, their weapons already blazing. "Take cover!" Thomas yelled, diving behind a jutting support beam. Energy bolts scorched the walls around them, filling the air with superheated particles. As the firefight intensified, Thomas noticed his suit's energy reserves depleting at an alarming rate. Each return shot drained more power, and the Ithorians showed no signs of relenting. "We can't keep this up," one of the Onavim warriors shouted over the din. "Their armor is too strong." Thomas's eyes darted around the corridor, searching for any advantage. His gaze settled on a small panel near his feet, barely visible through the haze of weapons fire. The label read, "Singularity Projector, Extreme Caution." Without hesitation, Thomas ripped open the panel and began rerouting power from his suit into the device. "Cover me," he ordered, his fingers flying over the alien controls. The corridor filled with an otherworldly hum as the Singularity Projector whirred to life. A pinprick of absolute darkness appeared in the air between Thomas and the advancing Ithorians, rapidly expanding into a swirling vortex of gravitational forces. The effect was immediate and terrifying. The heavily armored Ithorian guards lost their footing, their massive suits suddenly weightless in the face of the artificial black hole. Thomas watched as one by one, they were pulled inexorably towards the singularity, their screams cut short as they vanished into the void. "Now's our chance," Thomas shouted, deactivating the projector. "We need to reach the bridge before that rift tears this ship apart." As they sprinted towards the final bulkhead separating them from Knox, one of the Onavim warriors turned back. "I'll hold off any reinforcements," it said, its voice resolute. "End this, Thomas Freeman." With a nod of gratitude, Thomas activated his suit's fusion cutter, carving through the thick metal of the bulkhead. As the barrier fell away, he found himself face to face with Captain Knox. The Ithorian commander stood at the center of the bridge, surrounded by holographic displays showing Earth's cities under bombardment. In his hand, he wielded a crackling energy blade that hummed with ancient power. So, the monkey learns new tricks, Nox sneered, his insectoid mandibles clicking in anticipation. Let's see if you can dance, ape. Thomas barely had time to raise his own weapon before Nox was upon him. Their blades met in a shower of sparks, the impact reverberating through Thomas's entire body. They traded blows at a furious pace, each strike threatening to overload their suit's defensive systems. As they fought, the ship shuddered violently. The singularity rift was growing, tearing through bulkheads and twisting metal. Alarms blared throughout the bridge, but Nox paid them no heed, his focus entirely on destroying the human before him. Thomas felt his suit's power reserves dwindling with each blocked attack. Nox's relentless assault drove him back, step by step, towards the view screen showing Earth's devastation. With a sinking feeling, Thomas realized he was running out of options. In that moment of desperation, a crazy idea formed in his mind. Thomas disengaged from the fight, quickly tapping commands into his suit's control interface. "Hey, Nox," he called out, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "Catch this." With a primal yell, Thomas overloaded his suit's reactor, channeling every last joule of energy into a point-blank discharge aimed directly at the Ithorian commander. The resulting explosion filled the bridge with blinding light and searing heat. When the smoke cleared, Nox lay crumpled on the deck, his once pristine battlesuit now a charred wreck. Thomas staggered towards him, his own armor barely functional. "It's over, Nox," Thomas said, his voice hoarse. "Call off the attack, now." The Ithorian commander looked up at him, mandibles twitching in pain and fury. "You've won nothing, human," Nox spat. "My death changes nothing. The Ithorian Empire will—" Thomas didn't let him finish. With a swift motion, he ended Nox's life, granting the alien a quicker death than he deserved. Turning to the ship's controls, Thomas input the override codes, watching with relief as the bombardment of Earth ceased. But there was no time to savor the victory. The dreadnought groaned around him, the singularity rift growing more unstable by the second. Thomas sprinted from the bridge, every step a battle against the ship's failing artificial gravity. As he fought his way towards the escape pods, Thomas could only hope he'd bought Earth the time it needed. The war wasn't over, but humanity now had a fighting chance. Thomas's heart pounded as he hurtled through the void, chunks of asteroid debris pinging off his armor. The Worldbreaker loomed before him, its massive form blotting out the stars. He frantically tapped commands into his suit's interface, trying to stabilize his trajectory. "Koth! Anyone! I'm being pulled in!" Thomas shouted into his comm, but only static answered. The dreadnought's hull rushed towards him, a maze of metal and weaponry. Thomas braced for impact, his teeth clenched. At the last second, he fired his suit's maneuvering thrusters, aiming for a recessed docking port. He slammed into the ship's exterior, magnetic boots activating just in time to prevent him from bouncing off. Thomas clung to the hull, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He peered through the docking port's viewport, seeing Ithorian crew members rushing about inside. "No choice but to go in," Thomas muttered, overriding the airlock controls with his suit's hacking protocols. The door hissed open. Thomas launched himself inside, crashing into two startled Ithorian technicians. His energy blade flashed, cutting them down before they could raise an alarm. Alarms blared throughout the ship as he sprinted down the corridor, his HUD struggling to map the unfamiliar layout. "Intruder alert. Human detected in Sector 7. The ship's intercom crackled to life, the harsh Ithorian language grating in Thomas's ears. He rounded a corner, coming face to face with a squad of Ithorian shock troopers. Their insectoid faces clicked in surprise. Thomas didn't hesitate. He hurled himself at them, his armor's enhanced strength sending bodies flying. Energy bolts sizzled past him, scorching the walls. Thomas's fists and blade were a blur of motion. He fought with desperate fury, knowing Earth's fate hung in the balance. As the last trooper fell, he snatched up a fallen Ithorian weapon, its alien design uncomfortable in his hands. Pushing deeper into the ship, Thomas encountered heavier resistance. He ducked and weaved through volleys of fire, returning shots when he could. His suit's energy reserves dwindled with each hit he took. "Gotta find the bridge," Thomas panted, checking a computer terminal. The alien text swam before his eyes, but his suit's translation software slowly deciphered it. A violent tremor shook the ship. Through a nearby viewport, Thomas saw flashes of energy weapons as the battle raged outside. Onavim ships darted between asteroids, exchanging fire with Ithorian vessels. Thomas fought his way up through the levels of the massive dreadnought. His muscles screamed with exertion, but he pushed on. As he neared the command deck, the resistance intensified. Elite Ithorian guards swarmed him, their weapons more potent than anything he'd faced before. A lucky shot caught Thomas in the chest, sending him stumbling backward. His suit's integrity warnings flashed red. He dove behind a bulkhead, energy bolts sizzling past. The Ithorians advanced, chittering in their alien language. Thomas's mind raced. He was outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of options. The fate of Earth rested on his next move. As the Ithorian forces closed in, he readied himself for one final, desperate assault. Thomas Freeman hurtled through space, his battered Onavim battlesuit creaking under the strain. The World Breaker's gravitational pull yanked him inexorably closer, its massive form filling his field of vision. Warning lights flashed across his HUD, systems failing one by one. "Come on, you piece of junk," Thomas growled, frantically tapping commands. With a series of loud clanks, the outer armor plates of his suit detached, spinning away into the void. Now encased only in the inner shell, Thomas felt terrifyingly exposed. He redirected every scrap of remaining power to his thrusters, fighting to stabilize his trajectory. The World Breaker's defensive turrets came to life, unleashing a barrage of searing energy bolts. Thomas twisted and rolled, his heart pounding as he threaded between the lethal beams. "Just a little more," he grunted, straining against the G-forces as he aimed for the dreadnought's outer hangar bay. The opening loomed before him, a gaping maw ready to swallow him whole. Thomas hit the deck hard, his improvised shell carving a molten furrow across the hangar floor. Sparks flew as he skidded to a stop, leaving a trail of twisted metal in his wake. Dazed, he struggled to his feet, ears ringing from the impact. Ithorian ground crew scattered in confusion, chittering in alarm. Thomas's hand flew to his sidearm, muscle memory taking over. He fired with pinpoint accuracy, cutting down the alien technicians before they could raise the alarm. Smoke billowed around him as he sprinted across the smoldering hangar deck. His eyes darted left and right, searching for a way deeper into the ship. There, an access hatch. Thomas reached it in seconds, his energy blade flaring to life as he began cutting through the reinforced metal. The hatch gave way with a hiss of escaping air. Thomas plunged into the World Breaker's inner corridors, immediately encountering resistance. Ithorian soldiers poured from adjoining passages, their insectoid faces clicking in rage. Thomas fought like a man possessed, his energy blade a blur of deadly light. He parried plasma bolts, severed alien limbs, and pressed ever onward. The ship's layout was a maze, but he pushed through by sheer force of will, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. Meanwhile, in the void of space, the battle raged on. Koth stood on the bridge of his Onavim flagship, watching helplessly as the World Breakers shrugged off their most powerful attacks. Its shield flickered under the barrage but held firm. "Sir," an Onavim officer called out, "our weapons are having no effect. What are your orders?" Koth's alien features twisted in frustration. He considered their options, each more desperate than the last. Just as he was about to give the order for a suicidal ramming attack, a crackling transmission cut through the static. "Koth, do you read me?" Thomas's voice, strained but unmistakable. "Freeman, how in the void—" "No time to explain," Thomas interrupted. "I've accessed their data cores. The World Breaker's powered by a cold fusion reactor. The shields are linked to emitter nodes throughout the ship. Take those out, and we can hit the core." Koth's mind raced, formulating a plan. "Understood. We'll begin targeted strikes immediately. What's your status?" "I'm heading for the command center," Thomas replied, his voice nearly drowned out by the sound of weapons fire. "Gonna try to—" The transmission cut off abruptly. Koth turned to his crew, his voice filled with renewed purpose. "You heard the human. Target those shield emitters. Precision strikes only. We need to create an opening without destroying the whole ship." As the Onavim fleet adjusted their attack pattern, Thomas fought his way deeper into the Worldbreaker's heart. He encountered increasingly heavy resistance, elite Ithorian guards wielding devastating weaponry. Thomas's suit was falling apart around him, but he pressed on, driven by raw persistence. Finally, he reached the ship's central nexus. The massive doors slid open, revealing a cavernous chamber filled with pulsing energy conduits and holographic displays. And there, standing on a raised platform, was Grand Adjudicator Valix. The Ithorian warlord's compound eyes glittered with malice. "So the human vermin reveals itself at last!" Valix's voice boomed, amplified by the ship's systems. Thomas raised his weapons, every muscle in his body screaming with exhaustion. "It's over, Valix. Surrender now, and I might let you live." Valix's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Foolish ape. You've merely delivered yourself to your doom." With a gesture, Valix activated the Worldbreaker's internal defenses. Energy projectors sprang to life along the walls, filling the air with crackling beams of deadly force. Pulsing barriers materialized, cutting off Thomas's escape routes. Thomas dove and rolled, narrowly avoiding the first salvo. He returned fire, but his depleted weapons seemed to have little effect on Valix's personal shielding. The two opponents circled each other, neither willing to give ground. Outside, the Onavim fleet hammered away at the Worldbreaker's defenses. Koth watched intently as sections of the massive ship's shields began to flicker and fail. They were making progress, but would it be enough? Back in the command nexus, Thomas and Valix clashed in a fury of energy blasts and lightning-fast strikes. The human's reflexes were pushed to their limits as he fought to stay ahead of the Ithorians' attacks, while searching for a weakness to exploit. Alarms blared throughout the ship as the Onavim bombardment intensified. The Worldbreaker shuddered under the assault, but Valix paid it no heed, focused entirely on eliminating the human intruder. Thomas felt his strength ebbing away with each exchange. His suit's power reserves were nearly depleted, and Valix showed no signs of tiring. As another energy blast seared past his head, Thomas knew he was running out of time. He had to find a way to end this, and soon, or all would be lost. The command nexus shuddered as another volley from the Onavim fleet struck the Worldbreaker. Thomas Freeman and Grand Adjudicator Valix faced each other, their bodies tense, ready for the final confrontation. Valix's compound eyes narrowed, focusing on Thomas with predatory intensity. The Ithorian's mandibles clicked in anticipation as he unleashed a blast of searing energy from his weapon. Thomas reacted instantly, his battle-honed instincts kicking in. He dove to the side, feeling the heat of the energy beam as it passed mere inches from his head. The blast struck a control panel behind him, sending sparks and debris flying. Without hesitation, Thomas launched himself at Valix. His armored fists became a blur of motion as he unleashed a flurry of strikes. Each impact resonated through the chamber, accompanied by the crackling of Valix's energy shields. "You cannot win, human," Valix hissed, his voice distorted by the strain of combat. Thomas didn't waste breath on a reply. He pressed his attack, searching for a weakness in the Ithorians' defenses. Valix's personal shields flared with each hit, the energy field visibly weakening under the relentless assault. Just as Thomas sensed victory within reach, Valix's mandibles spread in a grotesque approximation of a smile. The Ithorian's hand shot out, activating a hidden control on the central command dais. A low hum filled the air as a shimmering portal materialized in the center of the chamber. Thomas's eyes widened as he saw what emerged from the swirling vortex. Ithorian hunter-killer drones poured through the rift, their metallic bodies gleaming under the harsh lights of the command nexus. Dozens of red targeting lasers locked onto Thomas, promising imminent death. "Shit," Thomas muttered, diving for cover as the air filled with lethal energy bolts. He rolled behind a damaged console, feeling the heat of near misses singeing his armor. The drones advanced relentlessly, their weapons carving paths of destruction through the command center. Thomas's mind raced, searching for a solution. His suit's power reserves were critically low, but he had one last trick up his sleeve. He activated his final countermeasure, praying it would buy him enough time. Clouds of nanites erupted from his suit, forming a shimmering barrier around him. The microscopic machines worked furiously, absorbing and dissipating the drone's energy blasts. But Thomas knew it wouldn't last long. He watched as the nanite shield gradually disintegrated under the barrage. Time seemed to slow as he assessed his options, each possibility more desperate than the last. Then he saw it, the command dais, the source of the portal that had unleashed this deadly swarm. With grim purpose, Thomas redirected every scrap of remaining power to his suit's thrusters. He burst from cover, a human missile aimed straight at the heart of the Ithorian defenses. Valex's eyes widened in surprise as Thomas hurtled towards him. The impact was devastating. Thomas crashed through displays and control panels, his armored body leaving a trail of destruction. Pain lanced through every nerve as he collided with the command dais. For a moment, chaos reigned. Then, as the dust settled, Thomas saw the fruits of his audacious attempt. The portal fluctuated wildly, its energies destabilized by the impact. In a blinding flash, the rift imploded. A whirlwind of energy swept through the chamber. Thomas watched in grim satisfaction as the drones were sucked back into the collapsing vortex. Their electronic screams cut short as the portal winked out of existence. The shockwave expanded outward, catching Valex off guard. The Ithorian's energy shielding flickered and died, leaving him exposed. Thomas didn't hesitate. He launched himself at Valex, his battered body fueled by sheer force of will. They collided in a thunderous crash, armored forms tumbling across the deck in a tangle of limbs and fury. They grappled fiercely, neither willing to yield. Thomas rained down blow after blow, feeling Valex's alien carapace crack under his fists. But even as he gained the upper hand, a chill ran down his spine. Valex's mandibles spread in a rictus grin of triumph. "You've lost, human," the Ithorian rasped. "Your victory means nothing." A series of alarms blared throughout the ship, their urgent wailing filling Thomas with dread. He saw Valex's hand move, tapping an implant embedded in his skull. The ship's computer spoke, its monotone voice a stark contrast to the chaos around them. "Warning, main reactor core overload initiated. Catastrophic failure imminent." Thomas's blood ran cold as he realized the full extent of Valex's plan. The Ithorian had activated the Worldbreaker's self-destruct sequence, a final, spiteful act to ensure Earth's destruction even in defeat. As the countdown began, Thomas knew he had only one option left. With trembling hands, he accessed the experimental singularity projector Koth had warned him about. It was a desperate gamble, but the only chance to save Earth from annihilation. Thomas took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. He activated the device, feeling the suit's remaining power drain away. The fabric of reality itself seemed to tear as a localized rift in space-time opened before them. Valex's eyes widened in shock as he felt himself being pulled towards the growing singularity. "No!" the Ithorian screamed, his claws scrabbling for purchase on the smooth deck. But it was futile. The gravitational forces grew stronger with each passing second. Thomas watched as Valex was dragged into the miniature black hole. Even in his final moments, the Ithorian's face was a mask of defiance and hatred. The singularity expanded rapidly, consuming everything in its path. Consoles, structural supports, and chunks of the ship's hull were torn away, sucked into the voracious maw of the artificial black hole. Thomas knew he had only seconds left. He diverted the last dregs of his suit's power to the emergency beacon, sending out a desperate warning to the Onavim fleet. As the event horizon approached the ship's reactor core, Thomas closed his eyes. He thought of Earth, of the billions of lives he had saved. It was worth the sacrifice. The singularity reached critical mass. In that final instant, the Worldbreaker ceased to exist, reduced to a single point of infinite density before erupting in a cataclysmic explosion that rocked the very foundations of space-time. From Earth, it appeared as a brilliant flash in the night sky, a new star born and dying in the same instant. And as the light faded, humanity looked to the heavens, unaware of the epic battle that had just...
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.